Chloe Miller had an extraordinary air about her. I felt that if she were my first love, I wouldn't have any regrets, even if we eventually broke up. So I pursued Chloe with everything I had. My pursuit moved her, and she agreed on 3 conditions. We would only date, we would not get married, and we would break up the day we graduated. I readily agreed. We were together for 3 years, living out a picture-perfect romance. On the day of our graduation, I was the one who brought up the breakup, but she backed out. I was stunned, but we had an agreement, didn't we? We break up when we graduate. I remember it clearly. At the end of that day, our conversation completely fell apart. Chloe lowered her usually proud head and laughed mockingly at herself. Ethan Cole, you had better pray we never cross paths again. From that day forward, I made a point to avoid her. But with a gentle nudge from fate, the world becomes a very small place, and there always comes a time when 2 people meet again. Chloe and I had a silent understanding, an unspoken rule we both followed. We were only a couple on campus. The moment we left school grounds, like for holidays, we'd each go back to our respective homes and cut off all contact. During those days of no contact, she was the well-known Chloe Miller of New York City, and I was the obscure Ethan Cole of Charlotte. We didn't send iMessages, didn't call, and didn't ask about each other's whereabouts, just as if we were still single. I thought this unusual arrangement would continue until we broke up at graduation, but the summer break after our sophomore year was especially long, a full 80 days. Before we left campus, Chloe asked me, "Will you miss me?" I hugged her, acting playfully. "Yes, I'll miss you so much." She pulled me closer and kissed the top of my head, but she never said something foolish like, "Then text me if you miss me." I always admired that rational side of Chloe. Her family was prominent, and her future partner would certainly be chosen from a similar background. We both knew perfectly well that there was no future for us together. The only reason we were dating was likely to experience a pure, simple college romance, and I just happened to be her type. At school, Chloe was my girlfriend. But once she stepped off campus and became Chloe Miller, she didn't want me intruding on her life. I respected her wishes, quietly playing my part and never overstepping my bounds. Back then, I never imagined that Chloe would be the one to break this rule. The summer break felt endless, and then she sent me a message saying she was coming back to campus early, a full month ahead of schedule. I was surprised when I got the text and teased her, "Why come back early? Did you miss me?" She never replied to that message. But from then on, whenever a long break came up, Chloe would ask me, "Do you want to go on a trip together?" Most of the time, I was happy to agree. We traveled to so many places together, watching the stars in the desert and seeing the sunset from a tropical island. I tend to get very focused when I'm admiring the scenery, so I was always startled by Chloe's sudden kisses. She loved to cup my face in her hands, leaning down to kiss me. It was a very dominant position. When it came to intimacy, Chloe liked to be in control, for me to be the one on the receiving end. Yet, every time things started to get serious, I would be the one to kill the mood and stop everything. Chloe's eyes would be filled with desire, her cheeks flushed, and she wouldn't say a word, just raise an eyebrow in a silent, questioning, "What's wrong?" My answer was always the same, "I don't want to." Even when desire was clawing at her, she would hold back until a thin sheen of sweat covered her skin. But as long as I said stop, she would always manage to restrain herself, go take a cold shower, and then come back to just hold me while we slept. After I'd refused enough times, Chloe seemed to guess what was on my mind. The next time things started to heat up, she would get up and head for a cold shower on her own, without me having to say a word. There was only one exception. That day, she saw an iMessage on my phone from a friend and asked me, "Who's this?" I didn't hide it from her. A friend from back home in Charlotte. She didn't say anything else then, but that night, she became much more assertive. I tried to push her away. She grabbed my wrists, pinning them to the headboard, and kept going. I dodged her kiss, stressing, "Chloe, I don't want to." "Why not?" she asked. "Is it because of that friend from Charlotte?" For someone so proud, when she got jealous, she was as difficult to handle as a feral cat. I never said it out loud, but I think Chloe understood that the reason I didn't want to take that final step was because I knew she wasn't the person I would end up with. I didn't want the bond between us to become any deeper. Chloe was a class act. She understood my reasoning and never forced me. It's just that after that, every time we were close, she was relentlessly intense, as if she were competing with someone. During the spring semester of our junior year, the day we had agreed to break up was fast approaching. The thought of our relationship ending filled me with a sense of loss. To avoid the pain later, I began to mentally prepare myself to let go. That year, Chloe arranged a trip for us to Napa Valley. On our second day in wine country, while I was still sleeping and adjusting to the time difference, a group of people burst into our hotel room. I was pulled from bed, forced into a tuxedo, given the perfect groom's makeover, and then led to a horse-drawn carriage waiting outside. I have no idea when Chloe had arranged all of this. She and I had a wedding ceremony at a beautiful, historic chapel, officiated by a real priest. There were no guests. It was just her and me. It was a wedding that wasn't legally binding. It wasn't until we were exchanging rings that I finally understood why she had uncharacteristically asked me for a ring as her birthday present that year. It was so that when the moment came to exchange rings, I would have one to give her. This wedding meant nothing in the eyes of the law. We both knew that. But that night, as Chloe was breathing heavily and about to head for her usual cold shower, I grabbed her arm. I pushed her down onto the bed and kissed her hard. Her whole body trembled as she cried out my name. Ethan. I chided her gently. It's our wedding night, Chloe. Don't be a spoilsport. I didn't care anymore. I thought to myself, I don't care what her future holds. For today, just today, I, Ethan Cole, was Chloe Miller's husband. I let myself go. Just this once. I thought it would be just that one time, but it ended up being many times. Some boundaries, once you cross them, it feels like you lose the right to enforce them ever again. You just keep retreating, breaking them over and over. Both Chloe and I had lost control. We couldn't stop. I told myself to think of it as a final indulgence before the end, a bit of madness to remember, so my time with Chloe wouldn't feel like a waste. I wasn't sure when Chloe would bring up the breakup. After all, our agreement from the start was to only date, not marry, and break up after graduation. We never specified the exact day. I waited in agony for a while, but she never said a word. My flight back to Charlotte was booked, and there was no more time to delay. Chloe and I needed to have a formal goodbye. I took the initiative and asked her to meet me at a quiet restaurant near campus, where I told her I wanted to break up. I had imagined how Chloe would react. I figured she would be her usual self, accepting it with a calm and casual grace, and then say a polite, dignified goodbye. I never expected her to just look at me quietly and say, no. I was too stunned to process it and asked blankly, no what? She stared deep into my eyes. Ethan, I don't want to break up. My mind suddenly went into a tailspin. Chloe was never the type to go back on her word. She always honored her promises. When she said something, she meant it. That's why I had been so certain that our breakup was inevitable. I never, ever expected her to change her mind. When did she change her mind? I hadn't noticed a single sign. I started to panic a little, because I had never considered a future with Chloe. Breaking up after graduation, that agreement seemed like the perfect solution for both of us. Chloe's sudden reversal caught me completely off guard. I was speechless. All I could do was stare at her in disbelief. My reaction must have been far from what she'd anticipated. A rare urgency crept into her voice. I know what you're worried about. Ethan, just give me 5 years. In 5 years, I promise, no one in the Miller family will be able to interfere in my marriage. When that time comes, we'll have a real wedding, invite all our friends and family to witness it, get a marriage license from the city, and we can officially declare to the whole world that we belong to each other. Ethan, she asked me, what do you say? Faced with her earnest plea, I guiltily avoided her eyes and forced myself to stammer. But we had an agreement, didn't we? We break up when we graduate. Chloe was visibly taken aback, asking without thinking, what? It had come to this. If I didn't make myself clear now, it would only lead to more misunderstandings. I took a deep breath and said it plainly. I want to break up. Chloe's gaze shot towards me, so sharp it felt like it could physically pierce me. She rested her arms casually on the table, her eyes locked on mine, and she radiated a terrifying intensity. Why? The word hung in the air with a dead stillness, as if she wasn't so much confused as she was waiting to hear me say the answer out loud. I had never felt such pressure from Chloe before, and wanting to just rip the band-aid off, I blurted out everything I was thinking. Because we're not compatible. I don't have any grand ambitions. All I want is to eat well, drink well, and live a simple, comfortable life. I don't want to be put through hell because of the difference in our family statuses. And I don't want to waste my energy navigating complex social circles. If I were to marry you, all of that would be unavoidable. So, the truth is, I never once planned on building a future with you. As I finished, my voice trailed off. I suddenly realized that compared to Chloe, I was being incredibly cruel. She was meticulously planning a future for us, while I was calculating every single personal cost. It was as if we were on a battlefield together, and she was ready to fight to the death for me. And I had already planned my escape route long ago, with no intention of ever looking back. I've said everything I need to say, I said, scrambling to my feet and tossing out a hasty, I'm leaving. Take care. As I made my escape, I turned to leave. A hand grabbed my arm. It was like a vice, refusing to let go. Flustered, I turned back. Chloe was still sitting at the table, looking up at me. She, who was always so proud, now looked like she'd been caught in a downpour, radiating a chilling coldness. She asked, "If you never intended to have a future with me, why did you give yourself to me?" My breath caught in my throat. I shook her hand off and feigned a casual tone. "I'm surprised you care about that sort of thing. I don't really see it as a big deal." She flinched as if she'd been stung, the light in her eyes fracturing. Then, a corner of her mouth twitched into a self-mocking smile. She let go of my arm and rose from her chair. Her tall frame instantly cast a shadow over me. She stood perfectly straight, too proud to stoop, so she simply lowered her eyelids, her gaze falling to look down at me. "Ethan Cole, you had better pray we never cross paths again. Otherwise, I can't say what I might do." My expression was neutral, but my palms were slick with sweat. I felt a pang of regret. I never should have gotten involved with her. That day, I fled the restaurant in a disheveled state and ran back to Charlotte without a second glance. From then on, even when I traveled, I made a point of avoiding New York City. I thought I would never see Chloe Miller again in my life. But in the end, life has a way of surprising you. My cousin was marrying into a wealthy family and invited me to the wedding. The wedding was in New York City. As soon as I heard the location, I immediately declined the invitation. However, the bride's family vetted the guest list from my cousin's side, and I was the only one they approved, the only one they deemed worthy of attending. In other words, my cousin's own parents weren't allowed to attend his wedding. Among all his friends and family, besides me, only a few of his groomsmen were given permission to be there. My cousin's father, my uncle, came to my house personally to beg me, hoping that as the sole family representative, I could be there to support my cousin. I was forced to accept this ridiculous responsibility. We were put up in a luxurious hotel. My cousin was getting married from the hotel the next day. The night before the wedding, some young guy added my cousin, Ryan, on iMessage and sent him over a dozen photos and a video of himself getting intimate with Ryan's fiancée. A wild bachelor party was raging at a villa about 20 miles from the hotel. It was full of scantily clad men and women, all having the time of their lives. In the video, the flamboyant young man was kissing the bride-to-be, Jessica, right on the lips. Ryan calmly locked his phone, called me and the other 6 groomsmen over, and said, "Come on, we're going to a party." I never thought I would see Chloe again. New York is a huge city, after all. I thought, what are the odds that after 4 years, on my very first trip back to New York, I would run straight into her? But fate has a twisted sense of humor. Ryan went there to make a statement. He walked right up to the young man and slapped him across the face without a moment's hesitation. The guy, indignant, looked to the bride for backup, only to find her watching with a smirk, clearly having no intention of defending him. The bride's name was Jessica Wallace. The young man didn't know that Ryan and Jessica had an agreement before they even got engaged. No matter who Jessica fooled around with, Ryan would turn a blind eye, on one condition. If any of her flings dared to provoke him directly, she was not allowed to intervene when he put them in their place. The guy had seriously overestimated his importance to Jessica. Ryan grabbed him by the hair and threw him out of the house. Jessica, acting as if nothing had happened, casually shut the door, then cheerfully wrapped her arm around Ryan's waist. "Don't be impolite," she said. "Since you're here, you should go say hello to Chloe." Ryan had just finished the confrontation. His collar was askew and his hair was a mess. He calmly straightened himself up. "All right, let me just fix myself up, and I'll be right over." Jessica left him and went over first. There was a group of people over there, all handsome men and beautiful women, looking glamorous. I couldn't tell if they were playing a game or just talking. In any case, it was much quieter over there compared to the chaos by the pool. Ryan glanced in their direction, then furtively waved the groomsmen closer and whispered, "You see that group over there? Except for the one in the middle, the rest are all fair game." Curious about the one he meant, I looked over and froze. It took me a long moment to tear my eyes away. I saw her. She hadn't seen me. It was Chloe. Chloe, for years older, looked different from how I remembered her. She had shed the last traces of youthful immaturity. Her features were now deeper, more composed, and she carried herself with an exceptional, commanding presence. The best-looking guy in our group of groomsmen, Ben, immediately fixed his gaze on her and asked Ryan, disappointed, "Why is she off limits?" Ryan pulled on the guy's arm, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "Her? She's out of our league. Don't even think about it, unless you want to get into serious trouble." The guy, Ben, had a bit of an ego, and after hearing that, he just said a cool, "Oh," as if he was taking the advice to heart. I made an excuse that I wasn't good at socializing and said I wouldn't go over with them to say hello. "Are you crazy?" Ryan said, dragging me forward. A guy like you should be meeting more successful people. He could be so aggressive. Worried he'd cause a scene, I quickly gave in and followed him, quietly approaching their table. Ryan called out to Chloe, greeting her respectfully as Ms. Miller. Chloe was as poised and gracious as ever, although maybe not exactly the same. There was a new layer of distance about her. She seemed approachable, but you could tell she wasn't easy to get close to. Ryan beamed. I didn't know you were here, Ms. Miller, or I would have brought my friends over to say hi sooner. Ben seized the opportunity. He confidently greeted Chloe, following Ryan's lead. Hello, Ms. Miller. Chloe glanced up at him with a faint smile. A young man next to her smoothed things over. Not many people call her by that title, buddy. You should probably just call her Ms. Miller like the rest of us. Ben playfully stuck out his tongue and gracefully apologized. My mistake, Ms. Miller. I was silently praising his social skills for defusing the awkwardness so easily when Ryan suddenly announced, Ms. Miller, this is my cousin, Ethan Cole. After he spoke, he stepped aside, leaving me completely exposed. The space in front of me opened up, and several pairs of eyes turned to me. The one coming from directly in front of me was especially sharp. The moment her eyes met mine, I felt an intense, piercing force. Knowing I couldn't escape, I slowly lifted my gaze to meet hers, looking at that face that was at once so familiar and yet so strange. I clenched my fists, feigning composure, and managed a small smile. Hello, Ms. Miller. Chloe's lips pressed into a thin, hard line. She stared at me, saying nothing. She looked incredibly cold and severe. The atmosphere wasn't exactly tense. We were both putting on a good act. No one seemed to notice the history between us. Ryan continued introducing his friends. The groomsmen were actively trying to mingle with the group. Chloe's friends were all friendly enough, and they were polite to Ryan, so the conversation kept flowing, until Chloe suddenly said my name, Ethan Cole. She said my name so unexpectedly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it instantly silenced the entire group. My heart gave a heavy, uncontrolled thud, and I instinctively looked at her. She was sitting on the couch, looking up at me, her expression unreadable as she slowly uttered 3 words. She said, long time no see. A silence so complete you could hear a pin drop followed. After a few seconds, Ryan found his voice, full of surprise. Ethan, you and Ms. Miller, you know each other? The question was finally out in the open for everyone to hear. I was at a loss for words. After a moment of careful thought, I gave my answer. We went to the same college. Chloe, who had been staring at me the whole time, tensed slightly at my words. She rose from the couch and walked towards me, step by step. She moved slowly, carrying a heavy, oppressive energy, like a storm cloud about to burst. She stopped in front of me and asked, with a self-deprecating tone, so, I don't even qualify as an ex-girlfriend? I was not prepared for her to ask that. I was caught completely off guard and couldn't say a word. Chloe, as if losing her patience, looked over at Jessica and said, it's getting late. Time to wrap this up. Jessica reacted instantly, saying, oh, right, that's it for tonight. Party's over, everyone. The party was over. Chloe reached out and took my wrist. I'll give you a ride. You don't have to, A jolt like an electric current shot up my arm from where she held me, and I couldn't bring myself to pull away. I let her lead me away from the prying, gossiping eyes behind us. The car moved silently through the streets. The windows were rolled up tight. The air conditioning was on. The drive to the hotel should have taken half an hour at most, but we never seemed to arrive. Watching the scenery slide past the window, I slowly realized that we were just driving aimlessly through the streets of New York. I didn't say anything, pretending not to notice. Chloe just kept driving with me in the car, I don't know for how long, until I finally broke the silence. I said, Chloe, I'm getting tired. She kept her eyes on the road, as if she hadn't heard me, but a moment later, she turned the car around. Half an hour later, the car pulled up in front of the hotel. I unbuckled my seatbelt, opened the door, and after a few seconds of hesitation, got out and walked away without saying a word. Ethan, her voice called out from behind me. I stopped in my tracks and turned around. Chloe's hands were resting on the steering wheel, her eyes fixed on me, her expression unreadable. I said nothing, my face a cold mask. She got no response from me. As if she couldn't bear my coldness, she lowered her eyelids for a moment, masking whatever emotion was in her eyes. When she looked up again, it was as if nothing had happened. Good night, she said. I gave a short, yeah, and hurried away, my mind in absolute chaos. I had barely gotten back to my room when Ryan called. Ethan, you and Ms. Miller. I knew exactly what he was going to ask and cut him off. There's nothing between us. Oh, okay, good. He said it was good, but I could tell he was still worried. Ethan, don't get mad at me for meddling. You probably don't know about the Miller family situation. People like them. They're on a completely different level from us. You can't afford to make a stupid mistake and ruin your life over it. She has a fiancé, Julian Astor. You've probably never heard of him. He's the youngest and most favored son of the Astor family, a real blue blood. Even Jessica's father has to walk on eggshells around him. Ethan, if you get mixed up in. I cut him off again, a headache starting to form. I know. You do? I know about the Miller family, and I know who her fiancé is. You don't need to worry about any of this. Oh, so you already knew? Ryan finally sounded a bit relieved. Well, as long as you know. Okay, I'll let you go then. Okay. After hanging up, I sat alone on the couch, clutching my phone, and zoned out for a while. I couldn't stop myself from thinking about Chloe. Every move she made after I saw her today, every subtle change in her expression, the tone of her voice, the look in her eyes, it all played on a loop in my head. I was shocked at how clearly I remembered every single detail. I let out a long sigh, leaned back on the couch, and covered my eyes with my arm. I gave myself 5 more minutes to force myself to pull away from those images, to bury Chloe deep down inside me, where she would be out of sight and out of reach. My cousin's wedding was the most miserable wedding I have ever attended. Ryan's father-in-law was Mr. Wallace. Jessica had her father's last name. Mr. Wallace had an overbearing personality. Jessica had gone against his wishes by insisting on marrying Ryan, and Mr. Wallace was clearly furious about it. He only relented because he couldn't say no to his only daughter, and only after he had made a series of unreasonable demands, all of which were met. Ryan's life in this wealthy family was not going to be easy. The first signs of that were already apparent at the wedding. Mr. Wallace had planned the entire reception, and Ryan trailed behind him the whole time, acting subservient. The slightest misstep, one word out of place, or one action that displeased Mr. Wallace would earn him a harsh reprimand. Ryan was so thoroughly berated he could barely look up, yet he had to keep a smile plastered on his face and play the part of the happy groom. Mr. Wallace clearly had no respect for Ryan, and by extension, he treated all of us, Ryan's guests, as if we were invisible. At one point, while making the rounds for toasts, Ryan called a guest by the wrong name. The guest was someone Mr. Wallace held in high regard. Mr. Wallace's expression soured instantly. After apologizing profusely to the guest, he couldn't contain his anger and dragged Ryan into a private room to tear into him. No one dared to intervene. Before the wedding, Jessica had been very clear with Ryan that her father had a terrible temper, and that a groom from a truly wealthy family would never put up with him. One of her conditions for marrying Ryan was that he had to be able to take her father's abuse. Ryan had agreed. So now, with Ryan being tormented by his father-in-law, Jessica had no intention of getting involved, much less helping him. As for the other 6 groomsmen, they were all terrified of Mr. Wallace and just stood there with their heads down, trying to be invisible. I was the only one who couldn't stand it. No matter what, Ryan was the cousin I had grown up with. I couldn't bear to see him so alone and helpless. The insults and contempt and the shouting from the room were too much for me to listen to. I knocked on the door and walked in without waiting for an invitation. Seeing that someone had dared to enter without permission, Mr. Wallace raised his eyebrows in displeasure. Before he could speak, I said politely, "Sir, the guests are waiting for the next part of the reception." He recognized me as being from Ryan's side of the family. Mr. Wallace shot me a sideways glance, his head held high, his voice dripping with cold arrogance. "Who gave you permission to enter? You have no manners. Get out." Ryan's pale face was etched with humiliation. Maybe he had thought he could handle his father-in-law's abuse. But at that moment, he must have realized it wasn't nearly as simple as he'd imagined. I don't know if he was regretting his decision. He had to know that after the wedding, the real challenges were only just beginning. I had no intention of starting a fight with Mr. Wallace. After all, Ryan would have to live under the man's roof from now on. Not wanting to make the scene any more awkward, I tried to soften my approach. "The groom's makeup is a mess. He needs a touch-up. Why don't I take him to get it fixed while you cool down, sir?" But Mr. Wallace wasn't buying it. He seemed to think it was beneath him to speak to me, and instead directed his vitriol at Ryan. "So this is your family? Heh, just what I'd expect from your kind of." A soft but firm knock on the door cut Mr. Wallace off. A tall, slender figure was standing in the doorway. Her eyes landed on me as if no one else was in the room, and she spoke casually. "I've been looking all over for you. What are you doing in here?" I didn't understand what she was doing until I heard Mr. Wallace ask tentatively, "Ms. Miller, you know Ryan's cousin?" He didn't even know my name, just referring to me as Ryan's cousin. Ryan, as if he'd been thrown a lifeline, eagerly jumped in. "Ms. Miller and my cousin went to college together." No wonder. A soft chuckle escaped Mr. Wallace's lips, His tone completely transformed from its earlier harshness. He took Ryan's hand and patted it gently. "Ryan, you should learn a thing or two from your cousin. It's clear he's a capable young man, decisive, well-spoken, and knows how to conduct himself." Ryan was speechless. I couldn't think of anything to say either. We were both stunned into silence by his complete 180. Mr. Wallace's attitude towards me had done a complete reversal, and Ryan was benefiting from the change. The wedding was able to continue without further incident. It was all thanks to Chloe. Chloe sat down next to me, her long legs stretched out, and asked, "Are you heading back to Charlotte after the wedding is over?" I kept my eyes on the stage at the front of the reception hall, not looking at her, and gave a non-committal reply. "Yes, my flight is tomorrow morning. The tickets already booked." She was quiet for a moment, then looked up towards the ceiling, her voice low. "There are a lot of interesting places in New York. If you're interested, I could show you around." "No thanks," I refused flatly. "I have to get back to work." Chloe paused, her gaze distant, then asked, "What time is your flight tomorrow?" "I'll take you to the airport. Don't worry about it. It's easy to get a cab from the hotel." "Ethan," her voice suddenly rose an octave, and my heart clenched. "Is it that no matter what I do, the only answer I'll ever get from you is no?" Her constant concessions were already backing me into a corner. I braced myself and said something cruel, blurting out, "I have a girlfriend. We're already talking about getting married." Chloe froze, as if she'd been struck dumb. I thought, maybe I should change my flight. I'll go back to Charlotte the second this wedding is over. I don't have to wait until tomorrow. But before I could say I was leaving early, Ryan came up and pleaded with me. "Ethan, can you please come stay with me at the Wallaces for a little while before you leave?" He put his hands together in a begging motion, his eyes soft and pleading. He was pinning his hopes on me staying. That way, Mr. Wallace might go a little easier on him, for my sake. But it wasn't my presence Mr. Wallace cared about, it was Chloe's. And what right did I have to use Chloe's influence? I was firm. "No, I'm leaving tomorrow morning." Ryan grabbed my wrist, whining like a child. "Come on, Ethan, just stay a few more days. Jessica's dad is a monster. Just stay with me for a few days while I adjust." I pulled my hand away coldly, showing no mercy. "Ryan, from the moment you decided to marry Jessica, you should have known that this was the consequence you would have to bear." He wasn't expecting me to be so blunt, and losing face, he lashed out in anger. "Fine, if you don't want to, then forget it. I was just trying to give you an excuse to enjoy New York for a few more days." The excuse he came up with on the spot was laughably lame. I didn't call him on it. Ryan's marriage, just as he'd wanted, had helped him climb the social ladder. His family had moved from their small town to a mansion in Charlotte, with a driver and maids, and were chauffeured around in luxury cars. Their newfound wealth was the envy of everyone around them. Everyone praised Ryan for his success, saying his parents were lucky to have him. But who saw the humiliation he had to endure for that good fortune? Even the most ordinary couples struggle with family conflicts, let alone a regular person with nothing to his name marrying into a fabulously wealthy family. When a marriage is that unequal, the more powerful partner will always look down on the weaker one, naturally feeling that they don't even deserve to stand up straight. And this was just a family that Ryan considered within reach. With Chloe, it would be an insurmountable chasm. You don't have to jump into the flood to know that the current will tear you to pieces. Ryan chose the path that I had rejected. On that path, aside from Chloe herself, everything else was thorns. One wrong step, and you fall into an abyss. My harsh words were for Ryan, but they were also a warning to myself. Every time Chloe tried to get close to me, and I rejected her again and again, seeing that heartbroken look on her face. When she heard me say I had a girlfriend, and her face went pale as she froze in place. I couldn't ignore what I was truly feeling inside. My heart ached for her. Back when we broke up, Chloe had said it was best if we never saw each other again. Otherwise, she couldn't promise what she might do. It turns out she meant it. It seemed the only way I could control myself was to stay far away from her, so far that we would never meet again. Otherwise, I was afraid I'd become the stupid donkey chasing a carrot on a stick. So desperate for that carrot that I would walk through fire to get it, without a second thought. I couldn't wait to get out of New York. But things didn't go according to plan. On the way to the airport, I was in a car accident. After the screech of tires, the world spun violently. My leg was pinned, and my head was bleeding. In a daze, I heard the wail of approaching sirens. When I woke up in the hospital, Chloe was there by my side. She was holding my hand, her lips pressed against my knuckles. Her eyes were bloodshot, like she hadn't slept in days. The doctor said I was lucky. The driver had died instantly in the crash, but I had only suffered a mild concussion and a hairline fracture in my right shin, with minor displacement. The treatment was simple enough. They reset the bone, put it in a cast, and I had to come back for weekly x-rays. If I rested well and the bone didn't shift out of place, I could avoid surgery. If it shifted too much, I'd need an operation. Basically, I couldn't put any weight on my foot and had to rest like I was disabled. Since I was awake now, there was no reason to keep wasting Chloe's time, so I urged her to go home and get some rest. She still seemed to be in shock from my near-fatal accident. Her face was pale as she asked, "If I leave, who's going to take care of you? I can hire a nurse." "No, not a nurse. I wouldn't feel right about that. I'll call Ryan in a little while. Ryan and Jessica are on their honeymoon. They won't be back for a while." I was speechless. Other than Ryan, I didn't know anyone else in New York. Maybe I could ask my parents for help, but the thought of my parents flying all this way and potentially meeting Chloe made me instinctively dismiss the idea. My connection to Chloe couldn't be allowed to get any deeper. Seeing my predicament, Chloe suddenly asked, "What about your girlfriend? You came to New York for a wedding, and she didn't come with you. You get into a car accident, and you think of everyone else, but it never occurs to you to have her come take care of you?" My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at Chloe warily. She met my nervous gaze, her own expression unchanging. She said, "Ethan, I know you're lying." She called my bluff with absolute certainty. I had no defense, so I just pursed my lips, closed my eyes, and pretended to be asleep. I insisted on hiring a professional caregiver. Chloe, in a rare show of force, insisted on taking me to her apartment. It was a huge penthouse, her own place. She put me in the master bedroom, her room. She didn't seem to be busy. She spent most of her days hovering around me. I had no choice but to force myself to sleep. I figured if I was asleep, she would get bored and leave me alone. With that in mind, I pretended to be asleep every time Chloe came into the room. I thought she would leave, but instead, she would just sit down on the edge of the bed. After a little while, I felt the faintest touch as she brushed the hair from my forehead, her fingers tracing a line down to the tip of my nose. When they reached my lips, they paused. Then, a tingling sensation, the slightly rough texture of her fingertip gently tracing the curve of my lips. I suddenly realized she was tracing the outline of my face with her finger. The image of her leaning over me, her elegant fingers hovering just above my skin, flashed in my mind, and my heart started pounding so loudly it was deafening. I instantly regretted pretending to be asleep. Would it be too obvious if I opened my eyes now? Just as I had that thought, the mattress dipped beside me, and I felt Chloe's hot breath on my lips. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to do. Before I could even think, her lips were on mine. Startled, I reached up to push her away. She ignored my resistance, propping herself up with one hand while sliding the other under my head to deepen the kiss. We didn't stop until we were both breathless. A knot of frustration and anger tightened in my chest, and I finally exploded at her. "What is this about? Is it because I broke up with you? You've been holding on to it for all these years, and you won't be satisfied until you've forced me to give in. Is that it?" Hearing my words, the energy around Chloe instantly darkened. I watched her clench her jaw, her fists tightening, taking several deep breaths before she managed to say in a strained voice, "Ethan, don't try to provoke me." I glared at her, furious at her for provoking me, and even more furious with myself for my weak resistance. I was supposed to be staying away from her, just like I had for the past 4 years, not completely falling apart every single time she got close. I deliberately gave Chloe the cold shoulder. I used my coldness to build an impenetrable wall between us, to clearly define what I considered a safe distance. If Chloe ever tried to cross that line, I would use my indifference to push her away. Chloe knew this unspoken rule of mine all too well. She played along, but then she would push right up against my limits, testing my boundaries with reckless abandon. Over time, we fell into a strange, delicate balance, like being on a teetering seesaw, both of us working together to keep from upsetting the precarious equilibrium. My leg needed 4 to 6 weeks of rest, and during that entire time, Chloe only left the apartment once. Coincidentally, the day she went out, an unexpected visitor arrived. Chloe's younger sibling, Alex. Chloe had hired 2 full-time caregivers to look after me at the apartment. One of the caregivers let Alex in. I had never met any of Chloe's family. I barely even knew any of her friends. But Alex got straight to the point. "I knew Chloe wouldn't be home today, so I came specifically to see you while she was out," Alex said. "What should I call you? Brother-in-law? Or just Ethan?" Neither felt appropriate. "You can just call me Ethan." Alex sat down in the chair next to the bed. It was the same chair Chloe usually sat in, pulled up close to my bed. After sitting down, Alex didn't say anything, just studied me intently with large, piercing eyes. I wasn't used to being scrutinized like that, so I broke the silence. "Did you come here for a specific reason?" "I was just curious," Alex said with a charming smile. I wanted to see for myself the man who has my sister so completely captivated. I couldn't quite figure out the real reason for the visit, so I didn't press, just smiled and waited patiently for Alex to get to the point. Sure enough, after a few moments, Alex asked, Ethan, when is your leg expected to heal? I answered, I have a checkup next week. If everything looks good, they'll take the cast off then. That's great. Next Friday is my birthday. If you're free, you should come to my party. Sorry, I refused without a moment's hesitation. I'll probably be out of New York by then. Are you sure you can't make it? I invited Julian Astor. He's Chloe's fiancé. There it was. That was the real reason for this visit. I kept a smile on my face and deliberately sidestepped the mention of Julian, giving a vague reply. I have work I need to get back to, so I have to leave as soon as possible. Alex clearly didn't like beating around the bush. Seeing that I wasn't taking the bait, they asked me directly, Ethan, aren't you curious about Julian? I said, without hesitation, not at all. Alex was momentarily speechless, then tried a different angle. You know, for our first time meeting, you don't seem very curious about how I know your name. I understood the implication behind the question and wasn't surprised. I just assumed Chloe had mentioned me, I said honestly. Alex let out a short laugh. No, Chloe has never mentioned you. She was afraid of causing trouble for you, so she's been incredibly careful not to mention you to anyone. But we're not idiots. After Chloe graduated, she could have gone to grad school, but instead she was in a huge rush to come back and join the family business. She worked incredibly hard. There wasn't a single task given to her that she didn't complete successfully. My parents were so proud. They thought she was just being ambitious. That is, until she used her success as leverage to make demands, the first of which was to break off her engagement to Julian. My mother knew something was up right away. She had someone look into it, and they found you. My mother was the one who told me your name, and a lot of other things about you, like how you broke up with Chloe without a second thought and went back to Charlotte to become a TV reporter. One time, you were interviewing some fruit farmers and discovered how hard their lives were, how the fruit they worked so hard to grow was just rotting in the fields because they couldn't sell it. You felt sorry for them, so you quit your job at the TV station and started your own fruit distribution business from scratch. During your worst year, you lost a lot of money, but you gritted your teeth and made sure the farmers didn't lose a single cent, running yourself ragged until you finally pulled through. Now you run a huge produce market with your own app for sales, and business is booming. I'm not wrong, am I, Ethan? No, you're not wrong. I sounded calm, but inside, I was reeling. I never imagined that I had been living under surveillance for all these years. A pair of eyes had been watching me from the shadows, and I had no idea. Alex seemed to read my mind. Their expressions softened apologetically. Ethan, I hope you don't mind our family keeping such a close eye on you. It's just that Chloe has been acting so obsessed over you. In the 4 years since you two broke up, she first insisted on breaking off her engagement, and then she started her own company behind our family's back. My father had intended for her to work under our older sister, but Chloe refused that too. She and my mother fought constantly. Honestly, it's a good thing there are a lot of kids in our family, so Chloe has her 2 older sisters to pick up the slack. Realizing they'd gotten off topic, Alex brought the conversation back, their tone earnest. Ethan, our family is, admittedly, a lot to deal with. For anyone who marries into our family, our parents and the elders have to vet them very, very carefully before giving their approval. It can't be helped. For a normal person, a failed marriage might mean losing some assets at worst. For us, it could affect the fortunes of the entire family, so we have to be extremely cautious. Compared to someone from an ordinary background, whose history we can't know, someone who grew up in a similar world understands the stakes, which makes them a more suitable partner. Of course, that's not always the case. My parents, for example, think very highly of you. At this, Alex paused for a moment before continuing. Ethan, Chloe broke off her engagement with Julian a long time ago. She's single now. No, to be more accurate, for the entire 4 years since you two broke up, she's been single. There's never been anyone else. I couldn't help but be suspicious. Did Chloe send you here to say all this? Alex shook their head emphatically. My mother sent me. I'm here on her behalf. I couldn't tell how much of what Alex was saying was true, but after thinking for a moment, I asked, that birthday party, can I still come? Of course, you're more than welcome, Alex said, delighted. Ethan, what made you change your mind? Because I remembered that when we broke up, Chloe had begged me to give her 5 years, and I had heartlessly refused. I thought that 5-year promise was off the table, but I never imagined she had been working towards it all this time, all on her own. If everything Alex said was true, if Chloe had already done so much in secret, then the least I could do was find the courage to step into her world and see it for myself. I just wanted to choose the life I wanted for myself. That doesn't make me a coward. That evening, when Chloe got home and found out Alex had visited, the first thing she did was come to my room and ask, "What did you and my sibling talk about?" I told her the truth. They invited me to their birthday party. Seeing that I didn't seem upset, she relaxed and asked, "Are you going to go?" I lied. I told them no. The answer seemed to be what she expected. She just nodded, not saying a word, but a subtle air of disappointment settled around her. I got the cast off on Thursday. Chloe used the excuse that I needed to get used to walking again to make me stay one more night. The next day, I woke up and saw she wasn't there, so I assumed she had already left for the party. I pushed open the bathroom door without thinking. Chloe was standing in front of the mirror, fresh from the shower, shirtless, drying her hair with a towel. I got a clear view of her well-defined muscles and the chain necklace hanging around her neck. I had never noticed her wearing a necklace before. I felt the awkwardness of having walked in on her and quickly mumbled an, "I'm sorry," turning to leave. She reached out, pulled me inside, and pressed my back against the bathroom counter. Facing the mirror, I could clearly see Chloe's tall frame pressed against me from behind. Her damp hair clung to her cheeks, and her face was a blank mask, as if she were suppressing so much that all her intense emotions were raging just beneath the surface. Her bangs cast shadows over her eyes. Chloe lifted her unreadable eyes to meet my reflection in the mirror and asked, "Are you going to leave?" My mind was a complete blank. "What?" Her voice was low and raspy. "Will you still be here when I get home tonight?" Before I could answer, she took my chin between her thumb and forefinger and gently turned my head to the side. As my head tilted, she leaned in, her lips pressing against my exposed neck. A searing heat spread through me. I trembled in her arms, my voice barely a whisper. "You'll see me." She must have thought I was afraid of her leaving a mark. Even though her body was coiled tight with a screaming desire, she stopped, burying her face in the crook of my neck and taking slow, deep breaths to calm herself. It seemed that no matter what, she would always be able to stop herself if I asked her to. A painful ache bloomed in my chest. I turned in her arms and hugged her, pressing my face against her chest. "I'm not leaving today," I said. "No matter where you go or what you do, no matter how late you get back, I'll be waiting for you, okay?" Chloe froze for a second in disbelief, then pulled me into her arms and held me tight. I went to the birthday party with only one goal in mind, to meet Chloe's mother. If Alex hadn't been lying, they had been sent by Mrs. Miller. Since Mrs. Miller had sent Alex ahead of time and had also extended a warm invitation to the party, then Mrs. Miller herself would surely be at the party. And sure enough, I saw Mrs. Miller there. She was the center of attention, surrounded by a crowd of elegantly dressed women, yet she possessed a unique, noble grace that made her stand out. I didn't go without hesitation. The thought of those 4 years of being watched without my knowledge, the thought that even if her family didn't give me a hard time, choosing to be with Chloe meant a life spent navigating those social circles. The thought that once I took this step, there would be no going back to my simple life. I hesitated, my feet stopping in their tracks, but then an image of Chloe flashed through my mind. If she was going to insist on fighting for us, I couldn't bear to watch her do it all alone. Pushing all my doubts aside, I walked resolutely towards Mrs. Miller. Mrs. Miller had seen me long before I reached her, but she waited patiently until I was standing right beside her before she smiled. I got straight to the point. "Mrs. Miller, hello? I'm Ethan Cole. I would like to ask for your permission to love your daughter, Chloe." Mrs. Miller and I both knew what I was really asking. I wasn't asking for permission, I was asking for equality. Mrs. Miller's nod and her, "Yes, you may," was a promise that in my relationship with Chloe, I would be treated with respect by her family, that they would see me as an equal, not as an inferior. For any man entering a relationship with the intention of marriage, that is everything. As the guest of honor, Alex took the stage with Chloe on their arm. They were wearing a sharp suit. Their smile was bright and sunny, and surrounded by well wishes, they looked as happy and carefree as a child. Chloe played the part of the devoted older sister, standing by her sibling's side. Halfway through the party, a young man suddenly rushed in and threw himself into Chloe's arms. He even pushed Alex aside. I don't know what had upset him, but the young man buried his face in Chloe's chest, his arms wrapped tightly around her waist, his shoulders shaking as he sobbed. "Julian, what are you doing?" Alex said anxiously, trying to pull him off of Chloe. The young man shrugged him off. To avoid any misunderstanding, Chloe held her hands up in a gesture of surrender, letting him cry into her chest without any move to comfort him. She didn't know I was there. Alex did. Noticing that I was watching the scene unfold, Alex shot Chloe a regretful look and whispered, "Chloe, Ethan's watching." Chloe glanced over, and the next second, her eyebrows shot up in surprise as she pulled the sobbing Julian out of her embrace. Julian, caught off guard, looked shocked. He started to reach for Chloe again, but only saw her striding purposefully towards me. His tear-filled eyes darted between me and Chloe, and then with a loud wail, he threw himself into Alex's arms. Chloe reached me in a few quick strides, slightly out of breath, and rushed to explain. He just came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting it. He's like Alex to me. I just see him as a kid. I feel guilty about the broken engagement, so I didn't want to embarrass him in front of everyone. That's why I didn't push him away right away. I scooted over on the love seat to make room for her and patted the empty space. Sit down, I said. It's tiring craning my neck to look up at you. She obediently sat down beside me, her eyes anxiously searching my face, as if trying to gauge if I was angry. I leaned into her playfully. Yes, I'll miss you so much. The ring on your necklace, that's my ring, isn't it? The ring she gave me at our wedding in that little chapel. I gave it back to her when we broke up. That day in the bathroom, I saw it, hanging from the chain around her neck. It turns out she had been wearing it in secret all this time. I unclasped the necklace, took the ring off, and slipped it back on my finger. It still fit perfectly. A sudden impulse washed over me, and I asked Chloe, would it be terribly rude if we left early? She didn't seem to understand what I was getting at, but she answered anyway. No, it wouldn't. Then let's go back to your place. I want to be alone with you. Chloe, I've missed you so much. I had never told her that I was about to burst too, that for the past 4 years, there wasn't a single day that I didn't miss her. Later, I asked Chloe, if I hadn't gone to New York, if we had never met again, would we have just missed our chance? She held me tight in her arms. Ethan, haven't you realized? What I promised you I would do in 5 years, I managed to do in 4. I was afraid 5 years was too long, that you would have forgotten me. So I rushed, trying to get to you even 1 day sooner. That whole "it's better if we never meet again" thing was a lie. If you hadn't come to me, I would have come to you. We were never going to miss our chance, because I will always be running towards you.